This week I'm going to answer the number one question being asked about the FX3. Is it still worth it in 2021? I've been playing in bands for a while and I've spent way too much cash on amps and pedals. Our spare bedroom was full of gear, and no matter how quietly I played, my wife could still hear it all over the house. So why did I want to spend $2,500 on yet another piece of gear back in 2019? Because it's the best investment in gear that I've ever made. The FX3 is so much better than all of my old gear, there's just no comparison. But my wife told me that I've said that about a lot of gear, only to get rid of it soon afterwards to buy something new. She just wanted to know, is the Axe FX3 really worth it? Is it really worth it? Well, here's 7 points that I think spell it out. Point number 1, I mentioned the spare bedroom. My wife tripped over one of the pedal boards one day and commented that I really should look into modelers. It was like an obstacle course trying to walk through there, with 2 large pedal boards and 2 combo amps taking up much of the floor space. So I took her advice and looked into modelers, and without a doubt, the FX3 came out at the top of the list. Yeah guys, I listened to what my wife had to say and took her advice. She was impressed. Point number 2, that obstacle course was driving me crazy too. A pedal would stop working, I'd have to get down on my hands and knees figuring out what cable or pedal needed to be checked. Or if I got a new pedal, I'd have to try to figure out where I was going to plug it in. I had to get bigger power supplies to power everything. All of that is now in the past. There's one cable going from the guitar to the FX3, and I also have an FC6 foot controller, and it connects to the FX3 with an XLR cable. I run another cable to connect the FX3 to my computer. That's 2 boxes, 3 cables, total. Point number 3, the FX3 is the top-of-the-line preamp effects processor. So I sold all my pedals, which more than repaid the purchase price of the FX3 and the FC6. My amps will be getting sold soon too, as I have no need for them anymore. I mean, honestly, they're just collecting dust over in the corner. Point number 4, the FX3 has a headphone jack, so you can play as loud as you want and nobody else will be hearing anything. I can be jamming away at 3 o'clock in the morning in the spare bedroom and my wife will still be sleeping like a baby. Point number 5, I had all of those pedals and a stereo amp set up so that I could sculpt my tone. But then I'd record myself playing through my rig and it usually sounded flat. People kept on telling me to buy this preamp or that mic or yet another plug-in, but how much studio gear am I supposed to own? I could never really turn up loud enough to get a really good tone out of the amps anyway. Well, that's no longer an issue. The FX3 sounds freaking great when used in a studio setting. Just plug it in, hit record, and your tone will sound fantastic. And you can play as loud or as quiet as you'd like. Point number 6, if you're a gigging musician, just think of how many times you've had to set up, plug in, tear down, unplug, etc., so on. My back was screaming at me by the end of the night. Now I carry in one small rack, set it up, tell the sound guy where to plug in his cables, and I'm done. At the end of the night, I unplug the sound guy's cables, pack up the rack, and I am out the door. Point number 7, there's other modelers out there, some nice, others basically usable. We're talking Helix, Kemper, Quad Cortex, stuff like that. None of them has the feel that the FX3 has. None of them has the variety of amps, cabs, and effects. None of them gets the regular firmware updates that keeps the FX3 ahead of the pack. And none of them has the power to run complex setups like the FX3 can run. The setups that can be created on it make my old system look primitive by comparison. It's just so powerful and has so many inputs and outputs that some bands wrote all of their guitars, including bass, through just one FX3. And I haven't even touched on the MIDI capability. Look, the FX3, it's just a beast. But 2 years ago, my wife wasn't really sure that I had changed my ways, and she still wasn't 100% on board. Was the FX3 worth it? Was it everything I said that it was, or was I just going to dump it, just like I had dumped all my previous gear? Well, here it is 2 years later, and I have not bought any guitar gear except for strings. The FX3 is still at the top of the heap. My gas has been permanently relieved. It has been the best gear purchase that I've ever made in all my years playing music, and it just keeps getting better thanks to the firmware updates. Yeah, I thank my lucky stars that I have a very smart wife and that I was smart enough to listen to her. Is the Fractal Audio Axe FX3 still worth it in 2021? Oh, hell yeah!